Well, yesterday went well. Seems to be a positive response. Anyway, what have we learnt? Try to improve the background, try to take about a bit of ceiling and use my glasses occasionally, and then I'm not squinting at the screen all the time. I thought I'd carry on from yesterday, if this is going to be a series of things. What I want from this series is not only to promote my business, but to provide students, potential clients and colleagues, other surveyors, with some useful information and tidbits on how both my firm works and insight into professional work within the property industry or real estate area. The only way I can do that is if you guys understand where I've come from, understand where I've gained my knowledge, and trust me. So let's lay down the foundations for that by giving you a background as to where I've come from, what I've done, and how I got here. I'm Iain Skinner, Principal of Skinner Holden Property Advisors. As I say, this is the second podcast, which is already longer, or let's call it a PropertyCast, which is already longer than the first one, just by the introduction. So hopefully this will last 10 or 15 minutes, we will see. I'll give you a bit of insight into me, where I've come from, where my knowledge has been gained, and hopefully you'll find future episodes useful. So yes, I wasn't sure through A-levels what to do or what I wanted to do, and gave them about as much attention as that would infer. The best thing that came out of doing A-levels was I got packed off to a careers advisor, and my comment to her was, I don't want to be stuck indoors, but I don't want to be on the back end of a pick. I think I've managed that. I'm not stuck indoors, or at least I seem to be outside when it's raining quite a bit. The outcome was that she offered me cartography, and blimey, has that profession changed in the last 30 odd years, or estate management. I hadn't the faintest idea what estate management was. There was some mention of monopoly, and the Duke of Westminster came up in discussions, and I thought that sounds interesting. And then I looked a bit further, and I found that there was a specialism in rural estate management. I thought that sounds even more interesting. So I proceeded to fail A-levels, but on retaking, managed to get into an HND in East London, where I did 2 years looking at buildings, estate management, law and practice, planning, and Mr. Cullen as a planner, that was interesting, drunk lectures, planning and valuations, based in Stratford, which is now apparently quite smart. It wasn't back in 1989, but it was a great place to study, because we had the Docklands, which were just being built on our doorstep, a whole mix of really poor Victorian dwellings to look at, and obviously a whole load of social housing and industrial development going on all around us. We lived there too, just down the road. Did 2 years there, summer of which was spent at Henry Adams it was then Prudential in Chichester, going out and doing building surveys and looking at farms, valuing, a little bit of agency. Finished off my time there, and I'd applied to 3 universities. Harper Adams was just starting its new course in rural enterprise and land management. Cambridge, just so I could get the rejection notice, really, because I was no good at rugby. And Aberdeen, where I was actually quite interested to go to, but over that summer, Rachel and I rode up there on the motorbike. 2 days to get there. Got there and they didn't realise I was being interviewed, which, considering they'd sent me an invite, was a bit strange. So decided that was too far north anyway, and ended up going to Harper after the HND, which was quite a culture shock, going from an East London Polytechnic to Harper Adams, which back then had about 700 or 800 students. I wandered into the very nice canteen area or breakout room, and thought, great, free coffee and things, and got chatting to various people. I'd gone in there with another chap who'd just turned up too, and it wasn't until about halfway through we realised that we'd walked into the staff room, not a common room, and students weren't meant to be in there. We hadn't come across anything like that before. Anyway, got the degree, which was really good. Did a year out in Somerset, and then started to progress a career, really. Coming out in '93, feel for those coming out of university now, we had a tough time getting jobs. I landed a job in Hertfordshire for Freeth Malhewish on the back of compulsory purchase. They did a lot of work for all of the water companies in and around London and the home counties. So we serviced Thames Water, Anglian Water, Three Valleys Water and all their sister companies around the edge there, and occasionally did work for others as well. On their side of the fence, with everything from referencing through to negotiating compensation, and we did their valuation work, and I also picked up some valuation work while there, private bits and pieces. I remember the first one I went out to was an industrial unit in St Albans, once qualified. So yeah, 2 years there, then got qualified in '95. There wasn't much progression within the firm available, and a friend of mine got his polo ponies in, so I spent a fantastic summer bringing on a string of 4 polo ponies and being his groom for the year. The following year, really thought I'd better get back into the profession, because you're never going to pay a mortgage with a polo groom's wage. So I started contract doing valuations out of London, which we did for a year, and then a job came up closer to home in the Ministry of Defence, covering Dorset and South Wiltshire, and based out of Wiltshire. That was really fun. We did an awful lot of stuff there, negotiating for 2 years with Natural England as to whether DERA could reopen a vehicle test site, because the designations had ramped up, and nature had started to take it over, and we did get through those negotiations. We spent quite a bit of time again negotiating with Natural England over whether a significant development could take place in an SPA. An SPA is a special protection area. I think it had a full suite of SPA, SAC and SSI. So that was fun, and yeah, got through all of that with the right results, and the training feature that was required for the military vehicles was built, and the mitigation undertaken as well. On top of that, there was the usual day-to-day landlord and tenant works and valuations, the odd bit of compensation where the military and training had used farmers' fields or damaged small items, small boundary features and things like that. From there, so it was 2 years down in Dorset, and then spent a year up on Salisbury Plain. Similar sort of role, really, managing the tenants, liaising between the military and the tenants, and sorting out rent reviews, dilapidations, usual tenant issues. I say usual tenant issues, but when you've got a battalion of tanks going through a field of corn, I suppose it's not that usual. Forest Enterprise was next. Applied for a job as land agent for South East England. The post hadn't had a land agent in for 18 months or 2 years, and had been covered by an interim surveyor who had done the basics and kept things going, but he didn't really have time to do much more than that. So we had to bring the estate back into management, really, ensuring that the rents were full, managing the minerals tenants, often through agents, but doing quite a bit of direct liaison. We had about 20 odd houses to manage and refurbish when they became available and relet. A number of yards we either let, or some bits weren't even yards, they were just crossroads in forests that we let for wood processors. I think I had several art societies used our offices, and a couple of charities. We also did the triennial estate valuations, and at the time, first time at Forest Enterprise, there was a big push for sales, trying to keep the core estate in place but selling surplus assets, so where they could be sold off without detriment to the rest of the estate, we did that. Usually first ensuring that we'd crystallise any development value. It's quite a nice cottage down in Somborne, north of Fareham, that was literally just a tiny stable, or pair of stables with a hayloft above, and we got planning for that and then sold it at auction one night in the village hall, which was a great evening. The other main project from that first period at Forest Enterprise was Bedgebury Pine Eaton, which was quite a sleepy backwater. It had about 20 or 30,000 day visits there, and I worked very closely with the team on the ground, and the national team to get a new visitor centre on site. We got all the way through to tender for a £10 million scheme, and then the funding just wasn't there. It got pulled, and so we had to go back to the drawing board, and we started the process before I'd left of getting a more cost-effective project underway, and that came to materialise in about 2009 or so, 2008, 2009, for the new Bedgebury Centre, and that moved the visitor numbers from, as I say, 30 to 40,000 who used to visit the gardens and Pine Eaton, and probably a few thousand locals who visited the forest, but there weren't much in the way of facilities there, to now I think it's well in excess of 800,000 day visits. The visitor centre is absolutely heaving. There's a fantastic bike hire company in there, and a really good cafe, who we found the tenant for later on. We decided to move up to Yorkshire a few years after starting there, so I did about 4 years or so with Forest Enterprise, and then moved up to Yorkshire for one of those blots on your CV or career path that you see, which was with a farmer's auction mart, and we parted ways after about 6 months. But I went straight back into the Ministry of Defence, doing estate management for 4 sites across the north of England, RAF Boomer, RAF Spade Adam, Esmeals and Longtown, dealing with day-to-day issues of tenants and planning. Not an awful lot of valuation work there, but it was interesting work, and quite a lot of conservation discussions and how that impinged on operations, or how operations could help conservation work. That was a temporary contract, so within a year I managed to get a position working for a national firm of specialist rural planning consultants, and we did a lot of work with getting planning permission for cottages with agricultural ties, lifting agricultural ties from cottages where they had become redundant, getting permitted development, designing and building new farm buildings, did some valuations for the Wensleydale Cheese Company, also some certificates of lawful use and expert witness work for Leeds City Council, where they'd had a problematic tenant, and there was a dispute over what their tenancy was, and it was blatantly a riding stables, not agricultural. In 2009 or 2008, we were having our first child, Verdley, and we decided we should move further south or back south, closer to family. Had a conversation with my old boss at Forest Enterprise, who had my successor's resignation note in his hand, and he thought that could be quite useful. I applied for the job. I think I turned up with a pair of rugby boots to explain some point or other on teamwork. It must have been poor teamwork. Anyway, so long the short, I stepped back into the role as area land agent for South East England for what was then Forest Enterprise and has since become Forestry England. The main projects at that point were continuing with the estate management, but also Bedgebury was nearly completed as a visitor centre. Alice Holt had started a review. Alice Holt is a 800 hectare ancient woodland near Farnham in Surrey, on the Surrey-Hampshire border, and it had about 150,000 visits a year when I was there the first time round, and these had moved up to about 250,000 visits. The trouble was, it had a temporary block of toilets there, which I think had about 4 cubicles each, that we'd put in 4 years before, and these were getting absolutely hammered by the public just through volume of use and footfall. So a project was consulted on widely, and we managed to get planning permission for a minimal budget, because I wrote virtually all of the documents, for the new visitor centre, which has now been built. We were extremely fortunate with getting it built, because we'd gone through consultation process, planning, got the planning permission, first major planning application to be in the South Downs National Park, and then we were really fortunate to manage to get funding from within the Forest Enterprise, because timber incomes had gone up and there was a budgetary surplus which needed to be invested, and it needed to be invested quickly in a project that could roll out, and we had our brand new shiny planning permission in our hand. We also started moving forward on a new visitor centre at Wendover. That one's just been built. That went through several iterations, both while I was there and afterwards, before getting planning approval. Brams Hill, we bought that back in. We did an exchange with the landowner. It was leasehold, so we bought that back in as a freehold and created 600 acres of public access ground at Brams Hill, up in the Thames Basin Heaths. The other project that worked on a lot at Forest Enterprise was Forest Holidays, their first new site, built from scratch in a woodland near Basingstoke. If you look up on their website, Blackwood, brilliant facility with 60 cabins there, luxury cabins with lovely facilities around. That started 4 years earlier, when I first worked at Forest Enterprise. We were often approached, in fact, by people flying over Blackwood into Popham Airfield, wanting to put a Prescott house. So Prescott houses were ones of architectural merit that could be built in the countryside. There was a tumble-down house in the middle of the woods. The pilots would see this and say, "Oh, we want to build a house there and buy the wood off of you." Those didn't go forward, but what did move forward was someone flew over us with a more entrepreneurial attitude, and he wanted to build a cabin site there. Subsequently, there was a partnership between Forest Holidays and the Forestry Commission, and that project moved forward with Forest Holidays. It was a long haul through planning. Fortunately, I missed most of that and came in at the last 2 applications, and the successful one was for the 63 Forest Holiday cabins that are there now. I say cabins, but some of them are 5 bedrooms with kitchen and dining room. Yeah, they're great. It's worth a look. Forest England as it now is, I moved on from there and spent a couple of years with Surrey County Council. I'd known and had the opportunity I knew that the opportunity was going to come of setting up Skinner Holden Property Advisors. So I needed a bit of a change of scenery, really. Moved to Surrey County Council as their senior rural surveyor. Senior is a bit harsh, as I was the only rural surveyor, but we managed 80 tenants doing their rent reviews, planning issues and reletting. One of the interesting projects there was was an aquarium that had been left in a hell of a state by the former owner, who, when he hadn't agreed a rent with the land agent, had pretty much smashed the place up. We got that up together, let the house, and then let the land to Naturally Thinking, who are just about to open up, COVID allowing, for a new lavender farm and visitor centre over at the Little Woodman Cote near Carshalton. So that's a good place to visit too. So at Skinner Holden, having used that experience, I decided the four main areas that I'm going to offer are planning. So I have managed to get planning permission on back garden sites in Cambridge, on Class Q conversions from agricultural to residential, and on redundant yard for 4 residential units down in Bognor, funny enough, called Holden's Mews, which we took all the way through from initial ideas through to planning and sale to a local developer who built them out, and they're all now occupied. Valuations, I do valuations for inheritance tax of rural, commercial and residential properties, and compulsory purchase. So I've dealt with compulsory purchase on road schemes, pipeline schemes, and even a railway being reused, which is fairly unusual in the country. And then finally, I use my breadth of experience within estate management to advise estates on strategic estate management, what their strategic goals should be, help facilitate discussions between the families and their agents, and look at the opportunities that their estate can provide. So I hope that 22 minutes, that's doing well, that'll give you a insight into where I've come from, what my experience is, and be able to take some of the, not lectures, PropertyCast was the word I was using, a bit more seriously when they come and go. These will be added periodically. I'll try and keep it regularly, but if work gets busy, it gets busy, and I'm afraid the fees take priority. So till next time, it's Iain Skinner, and see you soon.